Roy Holt pulled into the Starbucks parking lot at exactly 3:47 p.m., same as every Tuesday. Precision kept his world stable. Laurel sat in the passenger seat, thumbs dancing across her phone screen, lips moving silently as she typed another caption for her wellness Instagram. The usual? Roy asked. MMM. She didn't look up. Make it oat milk today. My followers are asking about dairy inflammation again. Roy studied her profile for a moment. 3 years of marriage, and she still talked about her followers like they were real friends sitting at their kitchen table. He pushed the thought away and headed inside. The familiar coffee shop buzz wrapped around him. Laptops clacked. Steam hissed. Conversations about startups and yoga retreats filled the air. This was Ashridge, Oregon, where everyone had a side hustle and an opinion about gluten. Hey, Roy. Jess smiled from behind the counter, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun. Purple streaks caught the afternoon light. The usual for you and Laurel? Oat milk for her today. Of course. Jess grabbed 2 cups. How's the consulting business? Steady. Roy watched her hands move. Jess had been making their coffee for 8 months now. Always friendly, never pushy. Unlike most people in this town, she asked questions that felt genuine instead of calculated. That's good. Stability matters. She pressed the cups under the espresso machine, especially when other things get complicated. Something in her tone made Roy look up. Jess was staring directly at him, not through him like most service workers did. Her brown eyes held weight. 2 lattes. She slid the cups across the counter. Roy reached for his wallet, but Jess shook her head. On the house today. Roy picked up both cups. A yellow sticky note clung to the bottom of his. He almost missed it. Thanks. He started to turn away. Roy. Jess's voice dropped. Check your cup. He glanced down. The note read, bathroom. Now. Alone. Quiet. Roy's chest tightened. His training kicked into mental habits he'd built after his parents died, when Aunt Millie taught him to notice everything and trust nothing until proven. He looked back at Jess. She was already helping the next customer, but her eyes flicked toward the bathroom hallway. Roy walked to Laurel's car and handed her the latte through the window. I'll be right back. Need to use the restroom. Laurel waved without looking up from her phone. The bathroom hallway was empty. Roy knocked on the men's room door, then pushed it open. Jess stood by the sinks, arms crossed. This better be important, Roy said. It is. Jess pulled her phone from her apron pocket. I used to be friends with Laurel. Before you married her. Roy's jaw tensed. Used to be. I cut ties 2 years ago. After I watched her destroy my roommate's relationship for fun. Jess's fingers moved across her phone screen. She builds personas to get what she wants. Then she discards people when they're no longer useful. Why are you telling me this? Because she's planning to discard you. Jess turned her phone toward him. I recorded this yesterday. She was sitting at table 6 with that attorney, Ridge Fallon. Roy took the phone. The video showed Laurel and a man in an expensive suit, heads close together. Jess had been smart enough to position herself where she could hear them. Laurel's voice came through clearly. Roy's so boring and predictable. Mr. Safe Choice. But his consulting firm is worth $500,000 now. The reputation hit will be key, Ridge said. Once we establish a pattern of emotional abuse, the financial claims become much stronger. I've been documenting everything. His controlling behavior about money, his isolation tactics. My therapist is already on board to testify about my trauma. Roy's blood chilled. He watched his wife lean closer to Ridge. 6 months, Laurel continued. I'll file for divorce, claim abuse, and demand half the business. By the time his reputation recovers, if it ever does, I'll be set for life. Ridge smiled. And I'll be handling your case. Pro bono, of course. Laurel giggled. Of course. The video ended. Roy stared at the black screen, his mind processing. 3 years of marriage. Every morning coffee. Every weekend farmer's market trip. Every time she'd curled against him at night, claiming she felt safe with him. All of it calculated. There's more, Jess said quietly. I have screenshots of her text messages to Ridge. Plans for your business assets. She's been copying your passwords, documenting your schedule, building a case. Roy handed the phone back. His hands remained steady. The calm that had carried him through his parents' funeral through building his business from nothing, through every crisis it settled over him now. Why are you doing this? Because nobody deserves what she's planning. Jess's voice was firm. And because I'm studying psychology, I recognize emotional abuse when I see it. She's been conditioning you for months, Roy, making you doubt yourself, testing your reactions, setting up scenarios. Roy thought about the past few months. Laurel's sudden interest in his work schedule, her questions about his business partnerships, the way she'd started picking fights over small things, then accusing him of overreacting. How long have you known? I started putting it together 3 weeks ago, but I wasn't sure until yesterday. Jess tucked her phone away. I couldn't let this happen without warning you. Roy studied her face. What do you want in return? Nothing. I just want to see justice done. Justice? Roy rolled the word around in his mouth. That's a luxury most people can't afford. But you can. Roy looked at himself in the bathroom mirror. Same face he'd worn for 36 years. Same steady eyes that had watched his parents' coffins lowered into the ground. Same mouth that had learned to stay shut when emotions threatened to spill over. Laurel wanted to destroy him. Ridge wanted to profit from it. They'd made their choice. Now he would make his. Roy returned to the car. Laurel was still scrolling, now posting a photo of her latte with the caption, "Afternoon fuel for my beautiful life. Grateful for every moment with my amazing husband. Hashtag blessed, hashtag Ashridge life, hashtag wellness, 17 likes already. Ready?" Roy asked. Yep. Laurel finally looked up, smiling. The same smile she'd worn on their wedding day. Thanks for getting my coffee, babe. You're the best. Roy started the car. How was your day? Good. Had a client call about the retreat in Sedona. Then lunch with Ridge. You remember Ridge Fallon? The attorney? He's helping me understand some legal stuff for my business. Right. Roy kept his voice neutral. How's that going? Really well. He's so smart about contracts and liability issues. I'm learning a lot. Roy drove through downtown Ashridge, past the organic grocery stores and yoga studios, past the coffee shops filled with people curating their perfect lives. His wife sat beside him, already planning his destruction, chatting about her day like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. That night, Roy made dinner while Laurel filmed herself doing evening yoga in their living room. She'd set up ring lights and positioned her phone to catch the best angles. Her voice carried into the kitchen as she narrated her stretches for her Instagram story. Remember to breathe deeply and release any tension from the day. I'm so grateful for this peaceful evening with my supportive husband cooking in the kitchen. Feeling so blessed. Roy chopped vegetables with mechanical precision, each cut clean and even. He learned knife skills from YouTube videos after his parents died, when Aunt Millie was working 2 jobs to keep them afloat. Self-sufficiency had been survival then. Now it was simply habit. After dinner, Laurel curled up on the couch with her laptop. I'm gonna plan some content for tomorrow. That retreat company wants more wellness posts. Sounds good. Roy loaded the dishwasher. I have some client work to finish. Roy went to his home office and closed the door. He opened his laptop and began to work, but not on client projects. First, he researched Ridge Fallon, Oregon State Bar records, court filings, client reviews, social media presence. Ridge specialized in high-net-worth divorces and had a pattern of targeting tech entrepreneurs. His fee structure suggested he worked on contingency for particularly lucrative cases. Next, Roy accessed his home network logs. Every device in their house connected through his router, and he configured it to track data usage. Laurel's phone showed regular connections to a VPN service she'd never mentioned. Her laptop had visited legal aid websites, divorce forums, and private investigator services. The evidence painted a clear picture. Laurel hadn't stumbled into this plan. She'd been methodical about it. Roy heard her moving around upstairs. Water running, teeth brushing, the familiar sounds of her nighttime routine. Soon she'd call his name, ask him to come to bed, curl against him like she had for 3 years. His phone buzzed. A text from Laurel. Come up soon? Missing you down there. Roy typed back. 5 more minutes. Almost done. He used those 5 minutes to install monitoring software on the house computer they shared. If Laurel was documenting his behavior, he would document hers. When Roy finally went upstairs, Laurel was already in bed, wearing the silk pajamas he'd bought her for their anniversary. She smiled as he entered the room. "Long day?" she asked. "Not too bad." Roy began changing clothes. "How's your retreat planning going?" "Really well. I think this could be my breakthrough year." Laurel stretched, showing off her yoga flexibility. "Ridge thinks I should consider expanding into corporate wellness programs. There's real money in that market. Ridge has a lot of opinions about your business. He's just being helpful. His firm represents a lot of wellness companies." Laurel patted the bed beside her. "Come here. You seem tense." Roy slid under the covers. Laurel immediately pressed against him, her head on his chest. Her hair smelled like the expensive shampoo she'd started buying 3 months ago. Around the same time she'd started seeing Ridge, Roy now realized. "I love our life," Laurel murmured. "I love you." Roy stared at the ceiling. His wife's breathing gradually deepened as she fell asleep. Her phone sat on the nightstand, charging. The same phone that contained text messages plotting his destruction. Roy waited until Laurel's breathing became completely steady. Then he carefully slipped out of bed in the bathroom. He opened Laurel's phone. She'd never changed her passcode from their anniversary date. Roy spent 20 minutes copying everything: messages, photos, emails, app data. He transferred it all to a secure cloud account that Laurel didn't know about. The text thread with Ridge went back 4 months. It started with seemingly innocent questions about business law and gradually escalated into detailed planning. Laurel had been thorough. Screenshots of Roy's business documents, photos of their bank statements, voice recordings of Roy talking about work stress, edited to remove context and make him sound angry or unstable. Roy found the fake therapy sessions. Laurel had been seeing Dr. Elizabeth Carr, a therapist who specialized in trauma recovery. But the appointment notes Laurel had typed in her phone told a different story. She'd been crafting a narrative of emotional abuse, building a timeline of Roy's allegedly controlling behavior. "Roy questioned my spending today, making me feel guilty for investing in my business. Classic financial abuse pattern. He was distant during dinner, withholding affection to punish me. Dr. Carr says this is a manipulation tactic. Roy asked where I was going when I left for my massage appointment, monitoring my movements. Getting worse." Roy remembered each of these incidents. Normal conversations, casual questions, the routine interactions of a married couple. Laurel had twisted them into evidence of abuse. The most recent messages with Ridge outlined their timeline. Laurel planned to file for divorce in 6 weeks. She would claim Roy had become increasingly controlling and emotionally abusive. Ridge would leak carefully edited audio recordings to local media, portraying Roy as another tech bro who couldn't handle a successful wife, that Roy's consulting firm would lose clients. His reputation in Ashridge's tight-knit tech community would be destroyed. By the time the truth came out, if it ever did, Laurel would have half his assets, and Ridge would have his fee. Roy finished copying the files and returned to bed. Laurel stirred as he settled back under the covers. "Everything okay?" she mumbled. "Just checking something for work." Laurel pressed closer. "You work too hard. We should take a vacation soon. Somewhere peaceful." "That sounds nice." Roy lay awake for another hour, listening to his wife sleep peacefully beside him. Tomorrow, she would wake up and continue her performance. Loving wife in public, calculating predator in private. But now Roy knew the game they were playing. And unlike Laurel, he'd learned the rules from someone who never lost. Aunt Millie had taught him that survival meant watching, learning, and waiting for the right moment to act. She taught him that forgiveness was a luxury that got people killed. And she taught him that when someone showed you who they really were, you believed them the first time. Laurel had shown him exactly who she was. Roy closed his eyes and began a plan. Roy spent the next morning in his home office, pretending to work on client projects while actually studying his wife's patterns. Laurel had yoga at 9, lunch plans at noon, and a massage appointment at 3. She'd taken photos of his business calendar while he showered, not knowing he'd set up a hidden camera 2 days ago. "I'm heading out," Laurel called from the kitchen. "Back around 4. Have a good day." Roy's voice carried the same warmth it always had. Through his office window, Roy watched Laurel load her yoga mat into her car. She bought new workout clothes, recently expensive pieces that cost more than his monthly software subscriptions. He'd assumed she was investing in her brand. Now he knew Ridge was funding her wardrobe. Once Laurel's car disappeared, Roy got to work. First stop, Ashridge Community Bank. Roy transferred most of their joint savings into a business account that Laurel couldn't access. He left enough to avoid triggering alerts, but moved the bulk of their assets beyond her reach. Next, his attorney, David Kim. David had handled Roy's business incorporation and real estate purchases. He specialized in protecting tech entrepreneurs from exactly the kind of attack Laurel was planning. "I need to review my marriage contract," Roy said, sliding the prenup across David's desk. David opened the folder. "Haven't looked at this in 3 years. Everything okay? I'm being cautious." David read through the agreement. His eyebrows rose slightly. "This is more comprehensive than I remembered. Did Laurel have independent counsel when she signed this?" "She declined. Said she trusted me." "Interesting." David pointed to a specific clause. Section 12 covers dissolution terms. If either party commits adultery or attempts to defraud the other, they forfeit all claims to shared assets. Roy leaned forward. "Define attempts to defraud." "False accusations, fabricated evidence, conspiracy to damage the other party's reputation or business." Pretty broad language. David closed the folder. "Why do you ask?" "Like I said, being cautious." That afternoon, Roy drove to Levon's auto shop. His business partner was under the hood of a vintage Mustang, cursing at a stubborn bolt. "Hand me that wrench," Levon said without looking up. Roy passed him the tool. "We need to talk." "About what?" "Someone's targeting our business." Levon emerged from under the hood, grease smeared across his forearms. "Ooh, Laurel." Levon's expression darkened. "Your wife? What the hell are you talking about?" Roy explained everything. Jess's warning, the recorded conversations, the fake therapy sessions. Levon listened without interrupting, his jaw getting tighter with each detail. "That manipulative bitch," Levon finally said. "I never trusted her fake wellness crap. I need your help, whatever you need." Levon wiped his hands on a rag. "What's the plan?" "Nothing dramatic. We document everything, control the narrative, and let her destroy herself. That's it." "Roy, she's planning to ruin you. We should expose her now, get ahead of this." "No." Roy's voice was firm. "If we move too fast, she'll adapt. Change her strategy. I want her committed to this path." Levon studied his friend's face. "You're not just protecting yourself. You're planning something. I'm ensuring justice." Justice or revenge? Roy considered the question. Is there a difference? That evening, Laurel returned home energized and talkative. She bought new crystals at the farmer's market and wanted to show Roy how they aligned with her chakras. She filmed herself explaining their healing properties for Instagram, encouraging her followers to invest in their spiritual wellness. "Ridge says I should consider writing a book," Laurel said over dinner, "about overcoming adversity and finding inner strength." "What adversity have you overcome?" Roy asked. Laurel's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Well, growing up without my father, learning to be independent, building my brand from nothing. Your father left when you were 12. That was 20 years ago. Trauma doesn't have an expiration date, Roy." Laurel's voice took on the therapeutic tone she used in her videos. "I'm still healing from that abandonment. It affects how I trust people, how I form relationships." Roy nodded thoughtfully. "How does it affect our relationship?" "It makes me appreciate stability, security, having a partner who's reliable and steady." Laurel reached across the table to squeeze his hand. "You've helped me feel safe again." Roy looked down at their joined hands. "I'm glad I can provide that." After dinner, Laurel went upstairs to edit photos for her next post. Roy heard her moving around, rearranging furniture to create the perfect backdrop. She would spend 2 hours staging a single image to look spontaneous and authentic. Roy's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Jess. Are you okay? I haven't seen you at the coffee shop." Roy typed back, "I'm fine. Gathering information. Be careful. I've been watching her patterns. She's getting more aggressive." "How so?" "She's been asking other customers about you, trying to get people to share stories about your behavior." leading questions about whether you seem controlling or angry. Roy stared at the message. Laurel was building her case in real time, laying groundwork in their community. By the time she filed for divorce, half of Ashridge would already believe Roy was an abuser. "Thank you for the warning," Roy replied. "What are you going to do?" Roy looked up at the ceiling, where Laurel's footsteps moved back and forth as she curated her perfect life. "I'm going to let her finish." 2 weeks later, Roy implemented the first phase of his counterplan. He called Levon early on a Thursday morning. "I need you to act panicked today." "About what?" "The Morrison Project. I'm going to leak some false documents. Make it look like we're about to lose our biggest client." "Why would you do that?" "Because Laurel's been copying my business files. If she thinks we're in financial trouble, she'll move faster." "Get sloppy." Levon was quiet for a moment. "You're using her greed against her." "Exactly." Roy spent the morning creating fake emails and budget reports. He made it appear that Morrison Industries was pulling their contract due to budget cuts. The documents showed Roy's company losing 60% of their revenue. That evening, Roy left the fake files open on his laptop while he showered. When he returned, the computer had been moved slightly. Laurel's digital fingerprints would be all over his system logs. Sure enough, within 2 hours, Laurel had forwarded the documents to Ridge. Roy watched it happen through his monitoring software, tracking every keystroke. Ridge called Laurel immediately. "This changes our timeline," Ridge said. Roy listened through the house's speaker system, which he'd configured to pick up phone conversations. "If his business is collapsing, we need to move faster." "How much faster?" Laurel asked. "File next week, before he can hide more assets." "But I haven't finished documenting the abuse pattern." "You have enough. Dr. Carr's notes, the audio recordings, your journal entries. We'll claim the business stress made him more controlling and volatile." Roy smiled. They were taking the bait. The next morning, Ridge leaked selected portions of the fake Morrison documents to Brad Hutchins, the local business reporter who covered Ashridge's tech scene. Brad had been skeptical of Roy's success for years, eager to write about failure in the local startup community. Roy was ready for him. "Mr. Holt? This is Brad Hutchins from Ashridge Weekly. I'm calling about the Morrison Industries situation. I'm sorry, I can't comment on client relationships. I have documents suggesting Morrison is pulling their contract. That's 60% of your revenue, isn't it? I really can't discuss ongoing business matters. Sources close to the situation say your company is facing bankruptcy." "Any comment?" Roy paused, letting the silence build tension. "Who are your sources, Brad?" "I can't reveal that information." "Of course not." Roy's voice remained calm. "I'll tell you what. Give me 24 hours to check with my legal team. Then I'll call you back with a statement." 24 hours. "I appreciate that, Mr. Holt." Roy hung up and immediately called Brad back. "Actually, Brad, I changed my mind. Can you meet me this afternoon? I have something you need to see." They met at a small cafe downtown. Roy brought a folder containing the real Morrison contract, which showed a renewal and expansion worth twice the original amount, along with printed copies of Ridge's emails to Brad. "Ridge Fallon sent you those documents," Roy said, sliding the papers across the table. Brad's face went pale. "How did you?" "The documents he gave you are fabricated. Here's the real Morrison contract. Notice the signatures and dates." Roy opened another folder. "And here are Ridge's communications with my wife, planning to use you to damage my reputation as part of a divorce strategy." Brad stared at the evidence. "Your wife is working with Ridge Fallon? They're having an affair. This is their attempt to destroy my business before filing for divorce." Roy kept his voice matter of fact. "You're being used, Brad." "Jesus Christ." Brad shook his head. "I almost ran with this story. I'm not asking you to kill entirely, but I would appreciate accurate reporting when the Real story comes out." "What real story?" Roy closed the folders. "Trust me, you'll know it when you see it." That weekend, Roy drove to Aunt Millie's house in the hills outside Ashridge. She lived in the same small cabin where she'd raised him after his parents died. The porch was covered with plants, and classical music drifted from the open windows. "You look tired," Millie said, pouring coffee into chipped ceramic mugs. "I've been busy. With that wife of yours." Roy looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" "Roy, I taught high school for 30 years. I can spot a manipulator from space. Millie sat across from him at the kitchen table. Laurel's been performing since the day you met her. Question is, what's she performing for? Roy told her everything. Millie listened without judgment, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. What do you need? She finally asked. Cover. She's trying to destroy my reputation in the community. I need people to see her true character before she can play victim. Millie nodded slowly. I have an idea, but it'll require patience. I'm listening. The women's shelter fundraiser next month. I'm on the organizing committee. Millie's eyes sharpened. What if Laurel tried to take credit for something she didn't do? Explain. You make a large anonymous donation to the shelter. Enough to get attention. Then I arrange for Laurel to hear about it through the volunteer network. If she's as narcissistic as you say, she won't be able to resist claiming credit. Roy considered this. And then I expose her with receipts. Bank records, volunteer logs, witness statements. In front of the entire social circle she's been cultivating. That's elegant. Your parents taught me a few things about fighting dirty when necessary. Millie reached across the table and squeezed his hand. I'm sorry this is happening to you. I'm not. Roy's voice was steady. This is who she is. Better to find out now than after she destroyed everything. The next Monday, Roy transferred $15,000 to the Ashridge Women's Shelter through an anonymous foundation account. Within hours, news of the donation spread through the volunteer network. Millie called Roy that afternoon. She took the bait. Laurel just posted on Instagram about her major contribution to the shelter. She's claiming she organized the whole fundraising campaign. How are you going to expose her? The shelter's board meeting is Thursday night. Public session. Laurel will be there to accept recognition for her leadership. Millie's voice carried a familiar steel. I'll be there too, with documentation. Thursday evening, Roy attended the shelter board meeting. The community center was packed with Ashridge's social elite yoga instructors, tech entrepreneurs, and wellness influencers who treated charity work like a networking opportunity. Laurel sat in the front row, wearing a flowy dress she'd bought specifically for the occasion. She'd posted 3 Instagram stories about her passion for supporting vulnerable women and her commitment to social justice. Board President Jennifer Walsh called the meeting to order. Before we begin tonight's agenda, I want to recognize some exceptional community support. Laurel Holt has stepped forward to claim credit for organizing our recent major fundraising success. Laurel stood gracefully, her practiced smile in place. Thank you, Jennifer. When I heard about the shelter's financial needs, I knew I had to act. Women supporting women, that's what community means. Scattered applause. Roy watched faces in the crowd. Most people looked genuinely moved by Laurel's apparent generosity. I've always believed in using my platform for good, Laurel continued. My wellness brand reaches thousands of women who need to know about resources like this shelter. I was honored to coordinate the donation drive that raised $15,000. More applause, louder this time. Laurel basked in the attention, her voice taking on the inspirational tone she used in her videos. This is just the beginning. I'm committed to making the women's shelter a cornerstone of my advocacy work. Excuse me. Aunt Millie stood in the back of the room. Jennifer, may I address the board? Of course, Millie. You've been volunteering here longer than anyone. Millie walked to the front, carrying a manila folder. She moved with the quiet authority that had commanded respect in her classroom for 3 decades. I want to clarify something about this generous donation, Millie said. Laurel, when exactly did you organize this fundraising campaign? Laurel's smile flickered. Over the past few weeks. It was a grassroots effort. Interesting. Millie opened her folder. Because according to bank records, the $15,000 donation came from a single anonymous contributor. Not a fundraising campaign. The room grew quiet. Laurel's face flushed. Well, I meant that I coordinated with the donor. The donation was made last Monday at 2:17 p.m. through electronic transfer. Millie's voice remained calm. According to the volunteer schedule, you were at a yoga class at that time. Jenny Rodriguez was working the phones, and she received no communication from you about any donations. Jennifer Walsh leaned forward. Millie, what are you saying? I'm saying that Laurel had nothing to do with this donation. She saw an opportunity to claim credit for someone else's generosity and took it. Millie turned to face Laurel directly. That's called fraud. The room erupted in murmurs. Laurel stood frozen, her carefully constructed image crumbling in real time. This is a misunderstanding, Laurel said quickly. I was involved in the spiritual aspects of the campaign, sending positive energy, encouraging my followers to contribute. Your Instagram posts about the shelter began Tuesday morning, Millie continued, reading from her notes. 24 hours after the donation was already made. And your follower analytics show no significant traffic to the shelter's donation page from your account. Roy watched his wife's face cycle through emotions: confusion, anger, desperation. She'd been caught completely off guard, with no prepared lies to fall back on. I don't have to listen to this, Laurel said, her voice rising. This is harassment. It's accountability, Millie replied. Something you've clearly never experienced. Laurel grabbed her purse and stormed toward the exit. The room watched in stunned silence as she paused at the door. You people don't understand real advocacy, she said. I've built a platform that reaches thousands of women. I don't need to prove my commitment to anyone. She left. The door slammed behind her. Jennifer Walsh cleared her throat. Well, I think we should move on to tonight's actual agenda. But Roy knew the damage was done. Within hours, the story would spread through Ashridge's tight-knit social circles. Laurel's reputation as a charitable advocate was destroyed. Phase 1 complete. Roy arrived home to find Laurel pacing the living room. Her phone pressed her ear. I don't care what those people think, she was saying. My followers know my real impact. This is just small-town jealousy. Roy assumed she was talking to Ridge. He went to the kitchen and began preparing dinner, listening to her conversation. No, I'm not backing down. I'm doubling down. Tomorrow I'm posting about toxic community politics and how authentic advocates get attacked by establishment gatekeepers. Roy opened the medicine cabinet while water boiled for pasta. Laurel's prescription anxiety medication sat on the second shelf, alprazolam, prescribed by Dr. Carr for adjustment disorder related to marital stress. Roy had researched the medication extensively. He knew its effects, its interactions, and its withdrawal symptoms. He also knew that Laurel had been taking it irregularly, only when she felt particularly stressed about her plans. Roy opened the bottle and counted the pills. 12 remaining. He pocketed 6 of them and replaced them with identical-looking placebo tablets he'd ordered online. The switch was seamless. Dinner's ready, Roy called. Laurel ended her call and joined him at the table. Her face was flushed with anger, her movements sharp and agitated. Those people at the shelter don't know what real advocacy looks like, she said, stabbing her salad. I've done more for women's empowerment than all of them combined. What happened exactly? Roy asked. Laurel launched into a distorted version of the evening's events. In her telling, Aunt Millie was a bitter old woman jealous of Laurel's influence. The shelter board was corrupt and politically motivated. The whole incident was an orchestrated attack on Laurel's success. I'm thinking about pulling my support entirely, Laurel concluded. They clearly don't deserve my platform. Roy nodded sympathetically. That sounds frustrating. It is, but I'm not going to let small-minded people limit my impact. Laurel's voice took on a manic energy. I'm going to expand my retreat business. Start that corporate wellness program Ridge suggested. Show this whole town what real success looks like. Over the following days, Roy watched the medication switch take effect. Without her anxiety medication, Laurel became increasingly erratic. Her usual careful image management gave way to impulsive posts and defensive responses to criticism. When Instagram followers began questioning her shelter claims, Laurel posted a 40-minute video ran about fake community leaders and establishment corruption. She used language that alienated her wellness-focused audience, accusing local volunteers of being spiritually bankrupt and energetically toxic. Her follower count began dropping. Brand partnerships sent concerned emails. The retreat company postponed their collaboration pending clarification of recent events. But Laurel couldn't see the damage she was causing. Without medication to regulate her anxiety, every criticism felt like a personal attack requiring immediate defense. They're all jealous, she told Roy after another day of social media battles. I'm disrupting their comfortable little ecosystem, and they can't handle it. Roy found her in their bedroom that evening, stress-eating chocolate while typing furiously on her laptop. What are you working on? He asked. My book proposal. Ridge says now is the perfect time to get my story out there. About overcoming adversity and toxic community dynamics. Laurel's eyes were bright with manic energy. Publishers love authentic voices who aren't afraid to speak truth. Roy read over her shoulder. The proposal was incoherent, a rambling manifesto about spiritual warfare and corporate consciousness that bore no resemblance to her previous wellness content. This is intense, Roy said carefully. It needs to be. People are asleep. They need someone to wake them up. Laurel closed the laptop and turned to face him. You understand, right? You see how they're trying to tear me down. Roy looked into his wife's eyes and saw genuine paranoia taking root. Without her medication, the stress of maintaining multiple lies was fragmenting her psychological defenses. I see that you're under a lot of pressure. Exactly. Laurel leaned against him. You're the only one who really gets it. Everyone else is just threatened by authentic power. Roy stroked her hair while she pressed against his chest. His wife was unraveling in real time, her carefully constructed personas colliding and destroying each other. All he had to do was wait. 3 weeks later, Roy invited Laurel to dinner at home. He cooked her favorite meal, herb-crusted salmon with roasted vegetables, and opened a bottle of wine she'd been saving for a special occasion. What's all this for? Laurel asked, settling into her chair. She looked thinner than usual, her face drawn from weeks of anxiety and poor sleep. I've been thinking about us, Roy said. About our future. Laurel's eyes brightened. Really? The stress of my business problems has been affecting our relationship. I want to work on that. Roy poured wine into both their glasses. I love you, and I don't want to lose you. It was the opening Laurel had been waiting for. I love you too, and I want you to know whatever happens with your company, we'll get through it together. Roy smiled. I appreciate that. It means everything to have your support. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Laurel relaxed visibly, her shoulders losing their defensive tension. This was the Roy she'd expected to manipulate, vulnerable, grateful, ready to be managed. I've been talking to Ridge about some legal protections, Roy said casually, in case the Morrison situation gets worse. That's smart. Ridge really knows his stuff. He does. Actually, he helped me understand something interesting about our prenup. Roy reached under his chair and pulled out a manila folder. I thought you might want to review it. Laurel's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Our prenup. I realized you never read it carefully when we signed. I thought now it might be a good time to go through it together. Roy opened the folder and slid papers across the table, especially Section 12. Laurel set down her fork and picked up the document. Roy watched her face as she read the dissolution clause. I don't understand this legal language, she said carefully. It's pretty straightforward. If either of us commits adultery or tries to defraud the other, we forfeit all claims to shared assets. Roy took a sip of wine. Standard protection clause. Laurel's hand trembled slightly as she set the papers down. Why are you showing me this? Because I know about Ridge. The words hung in the air between them. Laurel's face went through a series of micro-expression: surprise, fear, calculation, defiance. I don't know what you mean. Roy pulled out his phone and opened the video Jess had shown him weeks earlier. Laurel's voice filled the dining room. Roy's so boring and predictable. Mr. Safe Choice. But his consulting firm is worth $500,000 now. Laurel lunged for the phone, but Roy pulled it away. There's more, he said calmly. Roy opened his second folder. Inside were printed screenshots of text messages, bank records, therapy session notes, and audio recordings. Months of evidence, meticulously organized. Your affair with Ridge. Your fake therapy sessions with Dr. Carr. Your plan to claim emotional abuse and take half my business. Roy spread the documents across the table like playing cards. I have everything, Laurel. Laurel stared at the evidence, her face cycling through emotions. Finally, she settled on anger. You violated my privacy. This is illegal. Actually, it's not. We live in a one-party consent state, and these are my computers, my house, my network. Roy's voice remained steady. But you're right about one thing being illegal. Conspiracy to commit fraud is a felony. You can't prove conspiracy. Roy opened another folder. This one contained Ridge's communications with Brad Hutchins, the fabricated business documents, and recordings of Laurel coaching Dr. Carr on her trauma narrative. Ridge leaked false information about my business to a reporter. You created fabricated evidence of abuse. You defrauded a therapist to build false testimony. Roy met his wife's eyes. That's conspiracy. Laurel pushed back from the table, wine sloshing from her glass. This is insane. You're paranoid and controlling, just like I told Dr. Carr. Dr. Carr is going to have some interesting conversations with the state licensing board. Apparently, there are ethics violations involved in fabricating patient histories. You're bluffing. Roy pulled out his phone again. This time, he played a recording of Laurel's voice. Make sure you document the isolation patterns we discussed. Roy needs to seem more controlling in your notes. The timeline has to show escalation. Dr. Carr's voice responded, I'm not comfortable with this level of creative interpretation. It's not creative. It's therapeutic. You're helping me process my trauma in a way that captures the emotional truth of my experience. The recording ended. Laurel sat frozen, realizing the scope of Roy's preparation. How long have you known? She whispered. Months. And you said nothing? You just watched. I wanted to see how far you'd go. Roy closed the folders. I wanted to understand exactly who I married. Laurel's composure finally cracked. You son of a bitch. You manipulative bastard. You let me think. I'll let you show me your true character. And you exceeded my expectations. Laurel stood abruptly, knocking over her wine glass. Red liquid spread across the white tablecloth like blood. I'm leaving. I'm going to Ridge's, and we're filing for divorce tomorrow. No, you're not. Roy's calm certainty stopped her mid-stride. What do you mean? Ridge won't be taking your call. He's been disbarred as of this afternoon. Laurel's face went pale. That's impossible. Roy opened his laptop and turned the screen toward her. The Oregon State Bar website showed Ridge's license status, suspended pending investigation. Tax fraud charges were filed this morning. Apparently, Ridge has been creative with his client trust accounts. Jess provided some very helpful information to the IRS about his undocumented income streams. Jess, the barista, the psychology student who recognized what you were doing to me. She's been monitoring Ridge's activities for weeks. Roy closed the laptop. Amazing what people notice when they're paying attention. Laurel sank back in her chair. This isn't real. This can't be happening. Your bank accounts have been frozen pending the divorce proceedings. I filed this morning. Roy slid a legal document across the table. Based on the prenup you signed, you're entitled to whatever you brought into the marriage. According to my records, that's about $3,000 and a yoga mat. Laurel picked up the divorce papers with shaking hands. You can't do this to me. I'm not doing anything to you. You did this to yourself. Roy's voice remained conversational. I'm simply enforcing the agreement you signed. Nobody will believe this. I have followers, influence. You had followers. Check your Instagram. Laurel grabbed her phone. Her face crumpled as she scrolled through the comments on her recent posts. Her follower count had dropped by 60%. Brand partnerships were being canceled. The retreat company had posted a public statement distancing themselves from her recent controversial statements. What did you do? I didn't do anything. Your behavior over the past few weeks destroyed your credibility all by itself. Roy began clearing the dinner plates. Amazing how quickly people turn when they see your real character. This is revenge. Pure, petty revenge. Roy paused in his cleaning. No, revenge would be emotional. This is justice. There's a difference. What do you want from me? Roy sat back down and folded his hands on the table. You have two choices. I'm listening. Choice one, you disappear. Take your $3,000, leave Ashridge, and never contact me again. I won't press criminal charges for the fraud, and I won't release the audio recordings publicly. And choice two, we go to trial. I present all this evidence in open court. The recordings, the fake therapy sessions, your conspiracy with Ridge. The local media covers every detail. Roy's expression never changed. Your wellness brand becomes a cautionary tale about narcissistic manipulation. You spend the next 5 years dealing with criminal charges and civil lawsuits. Laurel stared at him for a long moment. You're not the man I married. No, I'm exactly the man you married. You just never bothered to pay attention. I loved you. You love what I could provide. Stability, security, a platform for your performance. Roy stood up. But you never loved me. That's not true. Then why did you try to destroy me? Laurel opened her mouth to respond, then closed it. She had no answer that didn't prove his point. I need time to think, she said finally. You have until morning. Choose wisely. Laurel chose to disappear. Roy woke up alone. Laurel's clothes were gone from the closet. Her toiletries cleared from the bathroom. She'd left her engagement ring on the nightstand with a note. You win. But this isn't over. Roy read the note once, then threw it away. Over the following weeks, Roy methodically dismantled the remains of Laurel's public image. He didn't need to attack her directly. Her own behavior had provided enough ammunition. Working through anonymous accounts, Roy began sharing information about Laurel's fraudulent business practices. Her yoga certifications were fake, purchased from online diploma mills. Her nutrition advice violated state regulations for unlicensed practitioners. Her retreat company had never filed proper business paperwork. Each revelation was backed by documentation. Roy had learned from watching Laurel that people would believe almost anything if you provided convincing evidence. Within a month, Laurel's entire wellness empire collapsed. Her Instagram account was permanently suspended for violating community guidelines. Her website went offline. The few sponsors who hadn't already dropped her demanded refunds for breach contracts. But Roy's most elegant move was also the most subtle. He created a documentary-style expose about fake wellness influencers, using Laurel as a case study. The video never mentioned her by name, but included enough specific details that anyone in Ashridge would recognize her. It focused on the psychological manipulation tactics used by narcissistic content creators to exploit vulnerable followers. The video went viral in wellness circles, shared by legitimate practitioners who were tired of fraudulent competitors damaging their industry's reputation. Within weeks, it had been viewed by millions of people. Laurel's face became synonymous with wellness fraud. Her image was used in cautionary articles about social media manipulation. She became an example of everything wrong with influencer culture. Roy never had to say her name publicly. He simply provided truth to people who were ready to hear it. 6 months later, Roy sat on the dock behind Aunt Millie's cabin, watching the sun set over the lake. Steam rose from his coffee cup in the cool evening air. His phone buzzed with a text from Levon. New client meeting went great. Morrison contract renewed for 3 years. Business is booming. Roy smiled and put the phone away. The screen door creaked behind him. Jess emerged carrying her own coffee mug. How's the new job? Roy asked. Amazing. Your nonprofit is doing incredible work. Jess sat beside him on the dock. The trauma counseling program is helping so many people. After Laurel's departure, Roy had transformed his consulting business into a hybrid model. Half traditional tech consulting, half nonprofit work supporting abuse survivors. Jess had become his program coordinator, using her psychology background to develop support systems for people escaping manipulative relationships. Any word from her? Jess asked. Roy shook his head. Nothing. As far as I know, she left Oregon entirely. Do you ever wonder what happened to her? Roy considered the question. No. She made her choices. Now she lives with the consequences. Don't you feel anything? Guilt? Regret? Roy watched a fish jump in the distance, sending ripples across the water surface. I feel peaceful. It was true. The constant tension of living with a manipulator was gone. Roy's shoulders no longer carried the weight of someone else's deception. His sleep was deep and dreamless. His mind was clear. Laurel taught me something important, Roy continued. When someone shows you who they are, believe them immediately. Don't waste time hoping they'll change. That's pretty harsh. It's honest. Roy turned to look at Jess. You saved me from years of additional damage. Why did you do it? Jess was quiet for a moment. Because I've seen what people like Laurel do to others. The psychological damage, the destroyed self-worth, the confusion about reality. She took a sip of coffee. And because you deserve to know the truth. Roy nodded. Truth is a gift most people can't afford to give. They sat in comfortable silence as darkness settled over the lake. In the distance, Ashridge's lights began to twinkle. Roy's former life felt like something from a movie he'd watched long ago, interesting, but not personally relevant. Any plans for tomorrow? Jess asked. Work. The new trauma counseling protocols need review before we present them to the state board. Sounds fulfilling. Roy smiled. It is. His phone buzzed again. This time, it was a notification from the bank, the final payment from selling his and Laurel's house. Roy had donated the entire proceeds to the women's shelter where Aunt Millie volunteered. Justice, Roy had learned, wasn't about punishment. It was about restoration, taking what had been broken and rebuilding it into something stronger. Roy finished his coffee and stood up, ready to head back. Sure. They walked up the path toward the cabin, where Aunt Millie was reading on the porch. Warm light spilled from the windows, and classical music drifted across the evening air. Roy paused at the bottom of the porch steps and looked back toward the lake. Somewhere out there, Laurel was probably building a new identity, finding new targets, perfecting new manipulation strategies, but that was no longer his problem. Roy Holt had learned the most important lesson of his life. Some people couldn't be saved, fixed, or forgiven. They could only be survived. And survival, he discovered, looked a lot like peace.